On this episode of Cinema Disaster, we're going to be talking about the 1990 live-action film Dick Tracy. Now, I realize that there hasn't been any sort of Dick Tracy television shows or movies since this movie came out. So there's a whole generation of people out there who may not know who Dick Tracy is. So for anybody watching that has no idea what we're even talking about, I'm going to give you a little, I guess, back history on who the character is. It was a comic strip by Chester Gould. It started in the 1930s. It was originally, its first appearance was in the Detroit Mirror, which was like a tabloid paper in Detroit, Michigan. And that was in October 4th of 1931. The comic strip was originally called Plain Clothes Tracy, which doesn't really make any sense to me. But what you said, you thought it was like a saying of the time or something?
Yeah, I think that was a saying of the time, and really, even now, like that's kind of from what I'm not a law enforcement officer, but that's kind of like police talk for like undercover or something, you know, plain clothes. You know, like I've heard stories about police officers doing things, but they were in plain clothes.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that.
You know, like a plain clothes security guard. At my last job, we sometimes would have that, like a security officer that just wears casual attire.
Yeah.
And then observes what's going on.
Because for those of you who don't know, Dick Tracy is a detective, and he solves cases with like forensic science, and he has like a lot of advanced like weapon like gadgetry. Like he has this like it's like a wrist radio or something that he talks.
Yeah, it's basically like a wristwatch, but it's a communicator. It's not a watch at all. It doesn't tell time, but it's how he communicates.
I had a toy one as a kid. I had like just plastic. It didn't really do anything. It wasn't a walkie-talkie or nothing. But I always wanted one of those growing up.
Yeah, me too.
And Dick, you were talking about the word Dick meaning detective. You got to tell the story about when you were a kid when this movie came out, and you thought you couldn't watch it or whatnot.
Yeah, so I was born in 1984. And I remember when this movie came out, and I was a kid, and funny enough, I knew the modern lingo of what Dick meant, and so when this movie comes out called Dick Tracy, I thought, you know, I can't see that movie. That's a bad movie. It's called Dick Tracy. That's a bad movie. And I remember my mom had to explain to me, like, you know, it's not, like, you're right about that modern lingo, but back then, you know, because it's a throwback movie.
Yeah, it takes place in the 30s. It's definitely a time period piece.
Yeah. And she explained to me that a lot of times people refer to detectives as dicks. Which is actually, that is kind of funny when you think about it. Yeah,
because like 1947 was like the last time there was a live action film, you know, until 1990. Like the last one was like, I think Dick Tracy's Dilemma, and then in 1947, and then there was another one that same year called Dick Tracy Meets Gruesome, and Gruesome was played by none other than Boris Karloff, you know, who was the mummy and Frankenstein's monster, the original. But Dick Tracy was this comic book strip. It went on to be like in the era of like radio shows and radio plays and things like that. It became a radio series from 1934 to 1948. There was also, in 1945, there was a musical comedy starring Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, Diana Shore. Then there was a comic book series in 1936 1937, there actually was a, back when the old movie serials were going on. They even had Batman movie serials. Do you remember the first one was Batman and then Batman and Robin?
Yeah. I have those, both of those.
So I have the Batman and Robin. I don't have the first.
I have both of them.
Yeah, and they're cool too.
They are actually pretty good.
But so this followed suit with that whole trend of movie serials. There was Dick Tracy, and then there was another serial in '38 called Dick Tracy Returns, and then 1945 there was like a number of films from 45 to 47, like we talked about, and then finally we get up to 1990, and we get this movie here. We get Dick Tracy, which was produced and directed and starring Warren Beatty as Dick Tracy. And what's weird is that Warren Beatty had the concept to do a new live-action Dick Tracy film as far back as 1977, but the film rights were owned by Michael Laughlin. And then in 1977, they went to Floyd Mutrux and Art Linson. Then United Artists took interest in doing the film and doing distribution in 1980.
Yeah.
Which they hired Tom Mankiewicz, who he was under negotiations to write, because he had recently had success with the Christopher Reeve Superman live-action films in the 70s, Superman and then Superman 2. But the deal with Mankiewicz fell through because Chester Gould, who was the creator of Dick Tracy, he insisted on strict artistic control. So over the years, the project, as far as directing and writing, went to Steven Spielberg. It was offered to Jonathan Landis, Clint Eastwood, and then eventually in 1985, Warren Beatty got the rights to it, and he even considered Martin Scorsese, who as a director of Taxi Driver and a bunch of
that would have been a very different movie.
Yeah.
I think
he was going to consider to direct, but in 1998, Disney finally greenlit the project. But I know that the whole reason that Warren Beatty took over directing duties is because there was so much trouble with this film and finding directors and all this stuff that he finally was just like, fuck it, I'm going to direct it myself.
Yeah. I think he did a great job.
Yeah, and music again, Danny
Elfman.
Who did, it's a good segue, because we talked about Tim Burton's Batman last time, and Elfman did the music for that.
Yeah, and he did the music for... He was kind of like the superhero guy at the time. He did Batman.
Army of Darkness.
He did Army of Darkness, which, say what you want, Ash is kind of a hero. He's kind of a superhero.
He is a hero.
Yeah. He did Darkman.
That's an awesome one, too. That's a good movie.
That is a really good one.
And Sam Raimi, again, speaking of Army of Darkness.
At that time, he did, all the way up to Spider-Man.
With Sam Raimi, Spider-Man.
Sam Raimi. Pretty much, if Sam Raimi directed a film, Danny Elfman did the score, and
from the band Oingo Boingo. We talked about that in Batman. Yeah.
But a little off topic there. But he was like the superhero guy. He was like the what's his name now? Hans Zimmerman is doing all the superhero stuff, or he was. But yeah, back in the day, that was Danny Elfman.
Yeah, and he actually got the job on this film because of his success with Tim Burton's Batman.
Yes.
And let's talk about, dude, the overall look of this film. We just watched it. It is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, surreal.
Film noir. They did a lot of...
Looks like a comic book.
It does.
And it doesn't look like any comic book. It looks like Dick Tracy comic strips.
It does. Because they Warren Beatty wanted to keep it to 7 colors on screen. It was primarily they used red, green, blue, and yellow. And also the original Chester Gould comic, it was, I guess it was inspired by Art Deco and German Expressionism, and they took all of that from the original comic strip and added it to this film.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this film noir look, and you have all these color, like the 7 colors they use, and it definitely looks it's not real, but it looks something out of a dream or otherworldly, like I said about the Batman film.
Yeah.
And nowadays it would all be CGI, but they did matte paintings, and you were talking about how good that looked, like those practical effects.
Yeah, because they look way better than CGI to me.
I mean, the look of this film is very, very striking, I think, with the color contrasts and the lighting. Some shots you have where they just have like a purple light on the street or a red light on the street, and it just,
yeah, or like in the like dark sort of warehouse parts where you see the shadow
the noir
of somebody sneaking by, and even the way they fight, like when Dick Tracy tracks down the kid for the first time to that little shack, and he beats up that ugly dude, which we should talk about the prosthetic
makeup.
But that style of fighting was even very comic bookish. Like nobody fights like that in real life, but that was very common. Like it reminded me of panels from a comic book. And I thought it was really awesome.
And like I said, this movie's awesome. But even if it did suck, you would at least have something awesome to look at. Because this movie is very much eye candy. It is very much like, it's just like an incredible look and overall feel to this film.
And it happens to have a good story.
It does have a good story.
And when I say that, I want to be clear, like, it's not like, oh my gosh, this is the best story I've ever seen. But it's a good, well-written, well-acted story that follows an arc and has a surprise at the end.
We won't ruin it.
Yeah. But it's good. It's good. It's fun. It's good, like, looks fantastic.
So we got Warren Beatty as Dick Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have his girlfriend, who is actually played by Glenn Headey, who plays Tess Trueheart. But then we have Madonna, and Madonna's character is Breathless Mahoney, who is like a singer dancer in like clubs or whatever in the 30s, or
an old time lounge singer.
Yeah, and there's an interesting dynamic that the script puts, with, like you said, where you said he loves Tess Trueheart.
Yeah,
but Breathless Mahoney
like represents like temptation,
because she's all about Dick Tracy.
Yeah,
and very seductive, I think, in certain scenes. And you said that actually as a kid, when you watch this, there's actually a lot of sexual stuff in this film that you didn't notice back then.
Yeah, I didn't notice back then.
I didn't catch it either back then. I have not seen this film since the 90s, so this is like an update for me too.
There's a scene with Al Pacino, right? That's who it is, right?
Yeah, he plays Big Boy, which is one of the crime bosses. There's lots of mobsters in this film.
And he, what a stretch, Al Pacino playing a mobster.
Right.
But, so he's talking to Breathless Mahoney, played by Madonna, and she's got like a mink, I don't know the term, something. She got a mink something on.
Yeah, like a scarf or something. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, and he pulls it off of her, and as he pulls it off of her, he says something like, I believe that if a woman doesn't wear mink, she don't wear nothing at all. Like, as he's taking it off of her, clearly that saying, like, you're gonna, like, I want to see you naked. And then her response is, well, I look good both ways, or something like that. But there's a lot of little things. I haven't seen this since I was a kid.
Right. So you're just not picking up on it.
Yeah,
me too.
I
just
was
not
like
picking up on it.
Surprised, kind of like, wow, that was in there. But then that's pretty par for the course for that time. 1990, they would do that a lot in films.
We also have Charlie Korsmo playing the kid, who's like an orphan that ends up somehow like hanging out with Dick Tracy and Tess Trueheart. You know, he's. You know, what would you say about the kid? He's always there. Like,
Yeah.
he likes the aspect of being involved in crime fighting.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose some people might consider him annoying.
Yeah, I didn't find him annoying.
No, I thought he was funny.
You might know Charlie Korsmo. He played in the movie Can't Hardly Wait. But
no kid, really?
yeah.
All grown up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But anyway.
It's been forever since I've seen that too.
Right.
But yeah, no, I thought.
And he was in Peter. He was in Hook. He was in Hook also.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was.
Dustin Hoffman in that movie too as Peter Pan, and Dustin Hoffman.
No, that was Robin Williams.
Well, that was Robin Williams,
Yeah.
but Dustin Hoffman was in it though as Hook.
He was Hook.
That's right. And then in this movie, Dustin Hoffman plays the character Mumbles. Is it monster named Mumbles?
Yeah. No, I thought the kid was cool. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it all worked.
And yeah, William Forsythe is Flat Top. So anyway, Disney marketed this film based on the marketing campaign of Tim Burton's Batman because that was such a success. So once again with this, Dick Tracy was everywhere, man. You had toys and comics and video games and, you know, all sorts of stuff. I mean, you couldn't get away from it. It was huge.
Like the only thing they didn't do was a cartoon.
Right, which as we were talking about, so many movies got the cartoon treatment back then.
Yeah.
That's what you did. You made a movie, and then you had all the toys and the video games, and then it got its own cartoon, and then, but yeah, this didn't get a cartoon that I know of.
Yeah, I don't remember one, but now that I'm thinking about it, it is weird that there were toys, but not a cartoon. Just because that was the formula, like, things like Batman and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles especially exploited that formula to a whole new level. Like, I know people who grew up in like the 70s and 80s.
I grew up in the 80s, so
they remember like the like Star Wars, how they had the movies and the toys.
Yeah, absolutely. I had all those toys.
And yeah, it was really successful. But I think Ninja Turtles just totally blew that away.
I had that too.
Like, because they had the comic books, they had the movies, they had the toys and the cartoon, and it was like
that was everywhere too.
Everybody wanted to do that. You know, they wanted to, do that formula and have it be successful. Nobody was as successful at it as Ninja Turtles. Because, I mean, that was just lightning in a bottle. Right time.
And they've made other Ninja Turtle, not just games, but cartoons since then, toys since then, movies since then. There hasn't been another Dick Tracy movie since this film because it's been caught up in a legal battle for years and years and years. And April of 2016, Warren Beatty mentioned the possibility of maybe there'll be another Dick Tracy movie or a sequel someday.
But
so, I mean, we don't know. Now it's 2019, and we still haven't heard anything. But maybe one day your generation will get its own Dick Tracy film.
And that would be awesome.
As long as they don't. Yeah.
As long as they don't try to do like a Christopher Nolan style, or they don't try to like, this is Dick Tracy from modern times.
Try to make it all real, like in the real world.
Yeah,
you know?
Dark and gritty. And I mean, I don't even mind dark. This
was dark. Yeah, it was.
This movie is pretty dark.
Yeah, it's film noir.
Yeah.
So.
But like, come on! It's about a detective that wears a bright yellow trench coat. You have to suspend realism.
Yeah, the movie, the whole time you're watching
it,
you don't feel like you're watching reality.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's not meant to be ever seen as like it's a real thing.
I remember we talked about, like, I don't want to give him any ideas, but remember what you talked about, how they might make it for modern times, like, let's make him wear a black trench coat with yellow trim, you know?
Yeah, like it would just have like a yellow lion trim around it or something.
Yeah.
Like, let's make him have machine guns.
Well, they do have
You know.
the machine guns in that movie.
Well, I
It was
mean, like, let's
mobsters,
make
like the
him
30s.
let's make him have them.
Oh, yeah,
like, or he's got fucking Batman gadget type shit or something. I don't know. I just think I would rather not have another Dick Tracy movie if
If that's the way
having
it's gonna
another
be.
one means they're going to go for hyper realism in quotes, because even hyper realism in movies is still not real.
And they would use CGI
even-
now rather than matte paintings, like
Yeah.
we talked about.
Yeah.
And the matte painting looks so good.
Yeah, it's really hard. It is really difficult to make CGI look good to me, and that's probably a whole nother video.
That is a whole other video.
Because what I mean by that is completely different than what I would say 85% of people who hear me say that might think I mean. But yeah, it would be really hard to duplicate what's in that movie with CGI.
But, of course, probably because Warren Beatty spent $101 million on this instead of the 25 million that he was supposed to.
Yeah.
Whoops. Instead, you know,
Yeah.
he was supposed to keep it under. It didn't make him as much money it was a disappointment to them at the box office.
Yeah.
Because they had hoped to make this into a franchise, like Batman and the Indiana Jones series and all that other stuff. But because it was disappointing and it didn't make as much money, it got all plans for a sequel, which they did have planned, got killed.
Yeah.
And that's why we haven't had one since. It's just been in all these legal battles. But, this movie, though, Dick Tracy, right here, highly suggest it for anybody who even if you have seen it, revisit it, because it's the first time I've seen it since, I don't know, in probably over 25 years, and it held up today, watching it again, just as much as I think I even enjoyed it more now than I did when I was a kid, almost.
I for sure did.
I understood more of it, and I don't know, it's really cool. So if you're a fan of film noir, or like comic books or comic strips, or even like old period pieces, mobster films, detective stuff, it's fun. I mean, if you want to have fun, even if you don't like the movie, it's something cool to look at. I mean, or you don't think you'd like the movie, like, watch it, because it's awesome. And if you don't know who Dick Tracy is, this is a great film for introduction to the character, in case they do make a remake someday. But yeah, I don't know. That's all I really have to say about it. What about you?
I would just say, I definitely enjoyed it more, I think, now than I did back then. I also have not seen it since I was a kid, and there's something to be said for that really old school. I'm a pretty big comic book fan, and so with all that's going on now in the cinema with Marvel and all that, like all these complicated stories they're telling, there's something to be said about a just straightforward old school comic where there's no complicated backstory. Like, why does Dick Tracy do what he does? Because that's what he does. There's no parents got killed. There's no flashbacks. It's just, that's who he is.
We have sort of a complicated love triangle between...
but that's relatively simple when you compare it to how comics got after that with their stories. So I always I dig that, going back and seeing just straightforward, simple stories. This is what it is.
Mesmerizing look and a lot of fun.
Yes.
So, until next time, check out Dick Tracy and keep watching.